I was dishonored, emotionally abused. I literally thought I was going to go crazy. And I was scared because I thought if I go crazy, I'm not going to be able to take care of my children. And they deserve the healthiest mom. Look, you trust your doctor. Take this medicine, you're going to feel better. But the months go on, the years go on even, you go, these medicines were actually harmful.
Welcome to the Rock Bottom Podcast, presented by Jigsaw Health, where we share health horror stories that inspire. I'm Ashley LaRue.
And I'm Patrick Sullivan Jr. Each episode, we explore raw, unfiltered journeys of survival, experiences that will inspire, educate, and remind you that no matter how low you feel, there's always a way up.
Before we dive in, just a quick note. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and it isn't a substitute for medical advice. Always consult a healthcare professional before making any changes to your health routine.
Today's guest shares how she reclaimed her life from illness, emotional trauma, and years of stress, finding strength in places she never expected.
So let's get into it. This is the Rock Bottom Podcast. Elaine, we're so excited to have you here today. Thank you for joining us. Do you recall what year it was that you remember the wheels really just starting to fall off the bus for you?
It was 40 years old, and my life had come to a screeching halt. My whole body was screaming, it's time to stop this chaos and this trajectory of being in a state of just wanting more. And I needed to stop and listen to that screaming inside of me. I wasn't sure where to start. I was making a really difficult decision at that time in my life to complete a 13-year marriage, where I was dishonored, emotionally abused. I was living with a narcissist I didn't know then. So it was like hell. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I look back and I really feel like I was in a prison that I couldn't get out of. And all I wanted at that time was for someone just to knock on my door. And mind you, I was living and married to a very well-known doctor, very successful, living in a big house, had, the cars, the house, everything from the outside looked perfect. But little did people know that I would go into my room every night alone and cry myself to sleep. I had 2 boys, and at the time I was trying to make this very difficult decision. They were only 8 and 10 years old. So how was I going to dismantle this life I had built? How could I do this? How did I get here? These were all the questions. I just wanted someone to knock on this big door with that big chandelier and come and save me. But nobody did. So I had to save myself. And that's where I was at age 40.
When you say your body was screaming at you, I assume you mean you had some physical manifestations, some physical illness type thing that would show up because of your emotional status? Is that what you would say?
Yes, my mental state was in decline. I mean, when you are an abused woman with the responsibility of 2 children, yourself, your husband, your home, your job, I mean, I literally thought I was going to go crazy. And I was scared because I thought if I go crazy, I'm not going to be able to take care of my children. And they deserve the healthiest mom. And that's really what inspired me, were my kids at the time, to get healthy. And what also happened was I was diagnosed with thyroid disease, Hashimoto's, to be specific. My body was breaking down at a very young age. And I was in the healthcare profession. I don't know if you know this about me, but I was a dental hygienist for over 20 years. So I was seeing patients since I was 22 and their health decline. I was seeing patients on medications that were causing them more illness than getting better. And here I was now in that same position of being faced with having to take a medication for the rest of my life. Like, how did I get here? And I knew that with my patients, they were like a mirror for me. I knew with my patients that it wasn't just them popping a pill that was going to get them better, because I knew who they were. I knew the stories of their life. I knew their emotional state, their mental state, their overall health. I would see their health histories every time they'd come in. And I'd connect these dots and I'd be like, they weren't getting better by the medications they were taking. It's their mental, emotional state. This is a holistic approach to health. I remember learning and thinking. And then I got this book that changed my life. And it was Louise Hayes' book, You Can Heal Your Life.
Yeah.
And I had that in my operatory for over 20 years. And I connected the dots with my patients, with their mental, emotional health and their physical health. And it was like, oh yeah, if someone came in with a kidney problem, well, this is the mental, emotional aspect of how that could be displaying. And then I was starting to connect that with myself too. And so I would look up, well, what's thyroid mean? Now, of course, this is, not science, but it's that ability to connect the dots that you can't just pop a pill and think that you're going to heal from the root. And that is what my whole goal has been. How can I heal from the root and pull that weed out from the root so it never grows back again?
What do you mean by that's not science? What did you mean when you just said that?
Well, no one has gone and looked at Louise's book and said, okay, well, she thinks the thyroid is the mental, emotional manifestation of, one thinking, when is it going to be my time? And using my voice to express. And yeah, at 40, I was thinking that. When is it going to be my time? I'm taking care of my husband, my kids, my patients, my family, my yard, me. I mean, when is it going to be my time to really focus on me? And not just my health, but like all those big questions that we ask in midlife, like, who am I? Why am I here? What is the meaning of my life? Instead of just going through the motions that I was going through.
Just trying to make it through a day.
I was just trying to make it day by day.
What were the Hashimoto symptoms that you were having?
Oh, well, it started off with brain fog, weight gain. You're a young woman, we want to feel beautiful. We want to look, vital and healthy. And everything was just like aging, thinning of my hair. I was like, what is going on? I'm a young woman. What is happening to me? And why? And who can I find to help me? So it was really hair thinning, brain fog, weight gain. Those were the main things that started immediately.
So no big deal then.
No big deal. Just like my whole outer,
Perception of yourself.
perception, exactly.
And then how did that affect your mindset?
I, of course, did not feel beautiful. Every woman wants to feel beautiful. And from the inside out, I'm really talking about real beauty that comes from the inside out. It was really affecting the deeper parts of me, not just outwardly, but thinking this is going to be the rest of my life.
Yeah. Really having nothing to look forward to, or just, I can't, if you had to put a number on it, a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst, during that time of like right before you broke, like what number would you have to put on your average day?
Well, 10 being the best and 0 being the worst. The problem with those days was that it was inconsistent.
Yeah.
And that's the part. So I would have days that were like 7, and then days that were like 2. And it was those fluctuations that mess with you.
Yeah. because you wake up every day and wonder, oh, what's this day going to be like? What number am I going to feel like today?
Absolutely.
And just be afraid, like when you go to bed at night, how am I going to feel tomorrow? Because those 2 days, those are tough.
Those are, because these are the things that we carry. These are the considerations of our lives that weigh heavy on us. Poor health, feeling hopeless, feeling helpless, feeling uncertain. These are emotions that weigh heavy on us. Being up all night with worry, not just about my health, but at how am I going to help myself and my kids get out of this horrible situation? Are we going to be okay? Are we going to make it? Can I do this? Am I strong enough to do this? Or should I just stay here?
I wonder if we could go down the narcissism rabbit hole a little bit and have you describe some of the behaviors that you saw and they were victim to.
You basically don't matter. I felt like I was a nanny in my own home. Yeah, that's a really bad feeling.
Yeah.
To not be honored as a woman, particularly who has given birth to children, such a sacred act. One that that identity is very important to me. And it's like he stole that from me.
When you say nanny, that is kind of an interesting phrase because like a nanny like basically just takes care of the children, right? Like why did you choose that phrase?
Because a nanny, there's no attachment. There's no emotional endearment. This is just a person that comes in who has one job, to take care of the children, to cook and clean, and then to leave.
Yeah.
And that was basically what I did. At night, I would leave. He would go to his room. I would go to mine. I remember times when the kids were sick and I was sick, and he wouldn't come home. His office manager would say, oh, he just stayed in his office. He didn't want to come home to help. And so these are mind bleeps
Yeah.
Yeah.
that wear on you, and the stress that my body was in. And I knew that stress causes inflammation, and I knew inflammation causes disease. And it was no wonder that I had gotten to that point in my life.
How do you think the kids were reading the situation back then?
Well, I feel like we hid it really well. And looking back now, with a lot of, time with my kids, they feel everything.
Yeah.
And so, of course, any loss of a family unit is devastating.
Yep. Even a bad family unit, I guess is what I meant to say, because it's the picture or the image or the utopian vision that you have for it, and even the nostalgia that you have about it, that, the brain and the mind kind of says, well, that wasn't that bad. And you're like, looking at it objectively, it was. But it's that loss that is so painful.
So painful. I remember finally deciding to leave and finding a home, and
What was the trigger?
of me leaving.
No, of you finally deciding, because I think we all as humans, we decide and then we do the action.
It's a great question. And it was so simple. It's like the straw that broke the camel's back after so much that I had endured, that I take responsibility of, that I accepted it. I went through it. The straw that broke the camel's back it's kind of silly. I was watching Oprah one day, and she had a doctor on, and it was a woman who was an expert in menopause. And I wasn't even close to that stage in my life. But she said, if you live with stress, if you live with consistent stress in your life, when you get to menopause, you will not be able to stand menopausal years. And I thought, I am living in so much stress. Now she's telling me when I, hit 50, I'm really screwed.
Right.
Prognosis negative.
Right. And I was like, I gotta leave, or else I'm gonna die here.
Wow.
Wow.
What an interesting straw, but I think that really is a good metaphor. I mean, there's a reason that phrase has been around for however long it's been around. There is eventually enough.
Yes.
And that's the message you needed to hear at just the right time in just this unique way. And it came through, and you received that, and you were like, okay, now it's time to do something different.
Yes. And then my whole, the gears shifted. Like you could tell now I went into mama bear mode. Like there was this inner strength that I knew I'd always had that was appearing now. Like before I was passive. I was like, okay, I'll just deal with him today and, deal with my life. But now, and I was shifting into a new gear of, it's time to get your act together, girl. And now you're going to find a way, because I've always found ways. That's just who I am. And I knew that about myself. I also have, and always have had, tremendous faith and trust in God. So that faith was so helpful. I remember as a little girl, my best friend's mom would always say to us, girls, you're going to need God in your life someday. You're just going to need God in your life someday. And I was like, okay. I'm like, well, here it is.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I look back and I think to myself, I know I was the one making the decisions and moving forward and getting this all together to leave and organize myself and the kids. But, there was something else that was literally carrying me through those days. I really do think it was a higher power, because I alone could not have done that by myself. I knew that something was carrying me, and I knew that I was not alone. And I know that we are never alone.
So I assume the divorce was simple and easy and painless over in just a couple of weeks.
No, he just hired the most high-powered attorney in the area.
Wow.
Because
And-
you were obviously squandering money and had hidden all the assets, right?
Right. It was very difficult. When you're in a different
How long?
when you're in a difficult relationship, it's going to be just as difficult to get out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That whole legal process, he took me to court. He took me to family court, and then he took me to the Supreme Court.
Wow.
Yeah. So this lasted 3 years,
Oh,
specifically during the initial years when you're just trying to get your sea legs, you're just trying to get your kids emotionally stable. Dealing with the pain of having to go and have your kids just half the week.
Yeah.
When I went from a full-time, did everything mom mode to now I don't have my kids 50% of the week. And then we moved into a tiny little house. So my whole life changed. I went back to work full-time. So here I was living in the lap of luxury. In pure hell, but.
Luxurious hell.
And there was this, I love this little house.
Because it was like your safe space.
Yes.
Yeah.
My kids shared a room. I could hear them talking, before they went to bed. There was just a lot of sweet moments that I was like, I think we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay.
were there any moments of sheer terror and panic?
I wouldn't say anything got to sheer terror or panic. No.
Good.
It didn't ever escalate like that.
Good.
Yeah.
How was your Hashimoto's during those 3 years?
I have always not been, I've always been under medicated and not, I mean, up until that point anyway, I had been under medicated. I was not being supervised in a way where I was maintaining any good levels. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember my TSH would be like in the 40s when a healthy TSH is like 1.
So your TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, was saying, give me some hormones to your body. And your thyroid was saying, we're exhausted. We don't want to work. We're not making any T3 or T4. Hashimoto's is an underperforming thyroid, correct?
Yes, it's hypo. Yeah,
hypo
hypothyroid.
underperforming. And so
That's right.
thus the sluggishness and the low energy and the brain fog and even the thinning hair. So did you eventually get better treatment? Did you start to take more T3 and T4, or did something
Well,
else change?
I was running on fumes at that point. And, you know, to make a good decision based upon changing my doctor, I think we can always admit at some point that we stay too long in anything. And in this case, I stayed too long with my doctor.
What kind of
And
doctor was it?
it was an allopathic family medicine doctor.
Allopathic, so traditional Western medicine,
Yeah.
uses insurance, writes
Yep.
prescriptions.
And totally well-meaning.
Sure.
Put me on levothyroxine, which
Yep.
is, you know, probably the most prescribed medicine in the country.
Yep. Is that a T3 or T4?
It's a T4.
T4,
Without T3, though.
right?
So I was just placed on T4.
So you were getting the active,
yes.
but not the precursor to the active.
That's
which,
right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, which you need.
Yeah,
But
And yeah.
well-meaning doctor,
right.
but not a specialist, not someone who lives and breathes this. And that was the mistake that I made early on was, look, you trust your doctor. Take this medicine, you're going to feel better. And so you do. And you just mentally think, okay, well, this is going to make me feel better. But the months go on, the years go on even, you go, because we're not so connected to our bodies in the ways that we need to be.
Right.
But when I wasn't feeling better, when the weight started happening, when the brain fog continued, when the inability to take deep breaths in, and I only found that out as to why all of this was happening was when I realized these medicines were actually harmful. And that's a whole other story.
I really want to know more about
Yeah,
that.
I was going to say, I think it'd be a disservice if we didn't drill down that
So
rabbit
I'm not
hole.
sure if I answered that question when you said, what did you do? But I stayed with an allopathic doctor, then I stayed too long, would be
Right.
the answer.
Right.
And it wasn't until I really, was about, let's say, 6 years into being a single parent, getting more in tune with my body, connecting some dots that I found a place at a retreat center that allowed me to quiet my mind. Because the rumination, the worry, I mean, it was just too much for me. And I almost just broke. And I had to find a quiet place to be able to look inward and figure this stuff out.
This must be the labyrinth.
Yes, that's the day I found the labyrinth.
Okay, and I do want to get into that, but I think let's talk a little bit about the medications, what you said right before this about the medications you felt like were harmful. I'm not sure if that's the exact word that you used, but let's drill into that for a second.
Yeah, I ended up, I was taking, a pill every day that was causing more harm than good.
When you say pill, do you mean the thyroid?
Yes.
Yeah, the T4, the
the T4.
levothyroxine. Why do you think the levothyroxine was causing more harm than good?
Because I found out that there are excipients in all medications, like binders and fillers and dyes and things that over the course of a decade, at that point, I'd been taking it for over a decade, stay in your body and cause harm. And my body was sensitive, and I didn't know it, to these fillers.
So to clarify, the active ingredient in T4, the levothyroxine, it's like maybe 100 micrograms or 200 micrograms, something like that. And micrograms, that's like a really small amount, but the pill itself is probably 500 milligrams. So there's just a little bit of active ingredient, and then they got to kind of put it in something.
Yes.
So they use binders or excipients or really just fillers. Do you recall what the fillers or the excipients were, or the dyes? Or, I mean, it's in all sorts of medications. There's actually a great documentary that we watched recently called To Die For that talked about, I think it's maybe Ritalin, that has red number 5.
40?
Or red 40. Forgive me that I'm kind of forgetting the details, but
They have dyes.
the point
in it,
is that there's dyes being placed into medications. I think under the like, we need to be able to know which pill is which, right?
Yes.
So there's like shapes, colors, sizes. Every pharmaceutical has a unique shape, color, size in order to identify what it is. And some
and
of
it's
those,
easiest just to throw a synthetic dye in there too.
well, it's cheaper, it's easier, and you're like, oh, it's just a dye. What could it possibly do?
That's right.
But so you were taking T4 for a decade, and you found that, wait a second, the other things that are coming along for the ride are causing me trouble. What can you
What was
talk
that
about?
aha moment like?
Yeah, what
Like,
was the
how'd
aha
you figure it
moment?
out?
Well, I got quiet, and I started to walk this meditative path, and I heard that morning, don't take your medicine.
Wait, you heard
I heard
from inside of you.
from inside of me.
So that morning, a medication you'd been taking for 10 years, you said, wait a second, my body is telling me, because I finally got quiet enough to listen, my body's actually saying, don't take the medicine.
And I was like, that's weird. Like, I'm in healthcare. I know you have to take your medicine. Like, you can't skip a day.
Yeah.
But I listened to it, and I trusted it, and I skipped the day.
You trusted your internal voice.
I did.
So you skipped a day, and you're
I
still
skipped a
here
day.
to tell the story.
here.
So obviously, it wasn't fatal. What did happen? What did you feel like?
I skipped another day. And I was like, wow, I feel like the clouds have just cleared. And I was like, how can that be? Here I've been told to take this medicine and that you'll feel better. And now I'm not taking the medicine, and I feel the best I've ever felt in my life.
Wow.
I remember sitting, that's why I love your t-shirt. It's fun to feel good. I remember sitting after those 48 hours in a chair in my house, feeling so good that I just wanted to just jump and scream and tell the world how good I felt. And I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to leave that chair. I just wanted to sit there and feel so good. And on one hand, it was the happiest day of my life. On the other hand, it was the scariest day of my life. Because when we are not bound to these illnesses as our identities, we now realize, oh man, I got to play a bigger game than I have been.
It's an awesome responsibility, and it's also incredibly empowering to recognize or to realize what you have available to you inside yourself.
And I got a glimpse that day.
For those that don't know, can you explain what the labyrinth is?
Yes, a labyrinth is a 4,000-year-old ancient formation that is built in the ground. It would look like a maze, but it's not. It's one way in and one way out. It's not to confuse you. But it's like those ancients knew that that was a place to really be able to get into a state of knowing, in a state of meditative state. And I really love it because for years I was a transcendental meditator and have been for 20 years, but this was a movement meditation. And at the time, I really felt like it was so supportive in that I could be out in nature, I could be walking, and wow, that really opened my senses. And my senses had really been numb for so many years. And now I was like, oh, I can hear the birds chirping. Oh, I can feel the crunch of the gravel under my feet. Like everything came alive. I came alive after going through this horrible loss. Like I went from being lost to being found, to feeling numb, to feeling completely open to all my senses. And then figuring out the thyroid medicine situation, I mean, my life just completely opened up. And like I said, it was thrilling, but it was so scary too. It was so scary. I'm like, wow, like imagine what I could do with my life now. I mean, it was amazing.
What an incredible leap of faith to be walking the labyrinth. You hear yourself tell yourself basically not to take this medication, and you didn't, and you were okay, and you decided to do it again the next day, and then you started to basically come back to life,
Yes.
but against all logic, maybe, because logic and our traditional medicine and the things that we are taught is listen to your doctor.
Yes.
You don't know what you're talking about. You don't have all the training. So how could you possibly make such a reckless decision?
100%. And I wanted to be responsible, but I knew there was something that my body was saying you would benefit from the active ingredient. Like you were saying, there is that active ingredient that I knew my body would really still, appreciate, but not all the junk.
Yeah.
And so I went back to then a new doctor.
What kind of doctor?
Now this one was a naturopathic doctor.
Okay.
Who would appreciate that I was listening to my intuition, who was spending more time with me instead of the 15 minutes that the allopathic had. And this was a person who was much more versed in thyroid and hormone health.
Yeah.
And she said, you might just benefit from a compounded version of T3 and T4, where they give you the active, but they're not going to put in all that other stuff. And she was right.
So you went to a compounding pharmacy. They made the T3, T4 mixture for you in the dosages that the doctor prescribed. And was it a cream or a pill or a...
It was a pill.
It was a pill.
Yep, it was a pill, but much smaller.
Yeah, yeah.
And just super clean.
Yeah.
Super clean. Basically, it was all it was in was the active ingredient and maybe some clear, solution.
Yeah.
And that's it. And it just reminded me of, the way I grew up was this very natural living. I grew up in Northern California in the redwood forests, in very, very, in nature. And so I can recognize something healthy. And that medicine now was as healthy as it could be. And my body was responding beautifully to it as well. And it was a thrill. It was really a thrill.
Did you retest after a few months your thyroid levels, and what were the results?
The results were much better, but then what started to happen was menopause kicked in.
Okay.
And messed up just in time to mess up everything that I had done.
Perfect timing.
Perfect timing.
Where was the finding the labyrinth in context of your divorce?
I found the labyrinth about 5 years after my divorce.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a while.
So 3 years of a divorce, 5 years post-divorce, the small house, the kids, but feeling a sense of like, okay, I'm away, we're developing new memories. And then you found the labyrinth and heard that, okay, stop taking your medicine. What else maybe happened in the labyrinth as you, because I kind of want to go back to that.
And were you walking it every day?
It was something I did regularly. So anywhere between 2 to 4 times a week on average,
And
because
how
it was
long would it
right by
take?
my house.
Yeah.
It would take varying, it would maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah.
20 minutes tops. But it was just my way of getting out in nature, clearing my mind, trying to hear my voice instead of the voice of the world telling me what to do. And
So you weren't listening to a podcast while you were walking the labyrinth.
no, the podcast of my own life.
Yeah.
Smart.
So it doesn't take a huge time commitment, but even as an experienced meditator for many years, you're saying just the fact that it got you moving while being kind of in a meditative state and being quiet, the movement aspect of it was kind of the magic for you.
It is the movement. It is the movement because, our bodies are 70% water. It was the swaying of that. It was the energy of my body resettling. It was my nervous system regulating into a state of harmony, of peace, of tranquility, of relaxation, into a state that was so foreign to me up until that point. And I couldn't get enough of it. I just couldn't get enough of it. But when I first heard the first message at that labyrinth, which was, it's time to surrender. I didn't know what that meant, but up until that point in my life, I had been trying to control everything and everyone. So I took it as a sign of it's time to cool down. It's time to think you have control over everything because you don't. And that kind of scared me because first I was like, well, who just said that? Where did that come from? But it was so clear and so crystal clear. And that day after my first walk around the labyrinth, I got back to my car. I turned on the car radio and the announcer was talking about, of all things, surrender.
Wow.
What a synchronicity.
A synchronicity that freaked me out, to be
Yeah.
honest. It really freaked me out because at that point I didn't really understand synchronicities and how that all worked. So I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But something's going on. And I actually didn't go back to that labyrinth for a month because I just knew that if I did, I was going to hear something else that maybe I didn't want to hear or that would scare me or that would require change.
So you had some fear
I had a lot of fear.
Well, change is scary for a lot of people.
for
Yes.
everyone. Change is
Yes.
just
Yeah.
the unknown.
Right.
Yes.
So the unknown for most of for our body, the unknown is scary because it might mean we don't get to survive, right? But the reframe could be the unknown is creation, love, excitement. Who knows what's going to happen next?
Adventure.
Adventure.
Well, like my dad used to say growing up, he'd tell us kids, you could live in the fear of the unknown or the fun of the unknown. And so, thankfully I was raised with really healthy people that, helped my mindset in difficult times. But I did go back that second time and I continued to hear things. And then I would see the synchronicity. And this has been my life now, of being able to tune out the noise of the world, because there's so much of it, and tune in to my own inner guidance that's just specific to me and nobody else. And I call that my soul's voice. It could be God's voice. It's just be still and know. It's really as simple as that. And it's hard to do in today's world.
How can people find a labyrinth?
They can go to labyrinthlocator.com
Okay.
There's a very large organization of labyrinth lovers. There are probably over 5,000 in this country alone, but they're all over the world. And it's interesting now. You know, people are wanting this quiet. People are appreciating this walking meditative tool that Labyrinth is, and people are building them on their own private properties now. So it's really a thrill to see this movement grow.
It's like this ancient thing that has been here for how many centuries, probably.
Yes.
This that's like all of a sudden it comes back into society, and you're like, wow, it's like it feels new, but it's not new.
Exactly.
You know, it's just new to you.
And the more and more that I started to clean and clear the medications, clean and clear my diet, clean and clear my life, the more I then was able to get to the next step of what else can I clean and clear. And the whole goal is to just be as light as you possibly can, to walk on this earth gently, to not fill a space, but to clear a space. Whether that's in your body, whether that's in your environment, whether that's in your mind, whether that's processing emotions that you don't have to carry anymore. So this has been the vision for myself, to clean and clear out my whole entire life so that I can be the lightness of being that will always help me be able to tune into that voice.
Because with all the clutter, it's almost impossible to hear it, you know?
You can't.
Yeah. Hence the title of your book, Get Quiet.
Yes. Get quiet. And initially I thought, well, that would just be a title to clear your mind. You know, it's kind of obvious. Well, get quiet so that your thoughts don't race, or that, you know, you don't have rumination. But it was just getting quiet in all aspects of life. Quieting enough so that you can truly hear what's important, so that we live out this life into perfection, which is such a beautiful honor. It's an honor to live your life out to perfection. And I don't mean perfection in a negative way, but in perfection of what God would think would be this beautiful life that we've been gifted.
Like to fully experience.
Fully experience.
Without judgment, right?
Without judgment. Without judgment. And so this was not just getting my body healthy, but really understanding the body, mind, soul connection. And healing in a very natural, holistic approach in a world that does not support this.
What do you mean by that?
Take this medicine. You know, giving kids medicine instead of, you know, helping them shift their diets. It's just, let's do the fastest and the quickest and move on so I can get to the next patient or the next, you know, there's just no thoughtfulness. There's no slowing down and really being thoughtful about an approach and a holistic approach to that individual. You know, when I went and got my genetics and DNA done, I realized that even though we humans are, 98% alike, it's that 2% that makes us different, but that makes us so different that this one size fits all approach to health is just, it's the wrong approach. It's one size fits one, and we have to armor ourselves with as much information as we possibly can about our bodies. And when I found my genetics and my DNA were such that, you know, I'm prone to diabetes, I'm prone to addictive behavior, I'm, you know, prone to not sleeping well. Well, you don't have to be at the effect of those things, because I don't have any of those things. But you can also be aware of those things, share those things with your doctor so that, for instance, if you have a dental procedure and they put you on a medication for pain, like, I'm prone to addiction.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have this. Give me some Tylenol, and I'll be done with it. I mean, you have to arm yourself with information about who you are and really take this seriously, because this is your life. This is how you are going to be feeling every day. And how you feel every day is how you're going to show up to the world and yourself and your family. So this is really important stuff that I've taken very seriously and spent a lot of time on.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned some dietary shifts that you made during this time for maybe people that have been diagnosed with Hashimoto's or other thyroid type conditions. What was successful for you? What kind of dietary shifts did you make?
It was based upon also my genetics. So really lean meat, very low carbs, vegetables, and just a little bit of fruit, just not much sugar really. And really just like that caveman, approach to living very simply. And I've done fasting, I've done intermittent fasting, I've done, juices, I've done so many different modalities. It's countless what I've done, not just in shifts in diet. But I've really taken so many different approaches to healing this Hashimoto's. And at least if I can't heal it, and I can't get off the medications entirely, at least I can have it under control so that I feel like myself. These medications don't allow you to feel like yourself.
Right.
And people's personalities change, especially if they're on these ones with excipients that aren't making you feel well. And so entire societies are changing because of it. As we're sitting here in this hour, 300 plus people will die because of mismanagement of medications in this country alone.
Wow.
This is a serious thing. And so I would highly recommend you going onto the site where your medication is. For me, it was a big box pharmacy, and trying to find what's really in these medications. And it's hard to find. It took me probably a half an hour by having to go through this puzzle and this maze of trying to find the actual ingredients to this particular medication I was on.
Yeah, and that's because the medications, especially if they're generic, could be made by different manufacturers using different binders, right?
Absolutely, and they change.
And they change.
They change. They make it so they change all the time.
So finding an up-to-date database, I wonder if maybe we'll do a little research on our end, and if we can find something that's like a good, solid database, we'll put the link in the show notes. And
Yeah.
I guess if it's not in the show notes, that means we didn't find it. Sorry. You're just going to have to Google it yourself. Wow. Do you take T3, T4 compound pharmacy anymore? Do you take any of those anymore?
Compounded T3
Compounded T3?
and T4.
Just the T3 now?
No, I do take a little bit of T4,
Okay.
which is all natural too. It's a brand. Do you want me to mention the brand?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's called Tirosint.
How do you spell that?
Tirosint.
Okay.
And it's a very clean T4, and then the compounded T3. And the doses are extremely low.
Yeah.
Do you know how that compares to like an NP thyroid product?
Well, yes. So I've been on every thyroid medication known to man. The NP is, I don't know the exact ingredients, but that did not sit well with me, the NP. I had tried that, but it didn't work at all.
What kind of side effects did you have?
I remember feeling extremely anxious, like it made me hyperthyroid
Oh.
and really uncomfortable, really uncomfortable. But again, it's like, how do you tune into your body enough to be able to identify these shifts within you? Or are you just feeling anxious because, you were triggered by something? Like, where is the anxiousness
Right.
coming from in a
It
day?
could be from anywhere if you're like
Exactly.
running so crazy busy like most of us are.
Yes.
And, it's like we don't even know that we're doing that. It's just our normal mode until you make yourself slow down and intentionally clear things away, clear the calendar bit, clear, and just slow down and make yourself sit with yourself for a minute, which can feel super uncomfortable at first. It was for me when I started to slow down and make more time for just being. One of the best things that I've ever done in my life, but it was like, wow, this is interesting how uncomfortable this is for me.
And then you find that what you feel like you've been missing all along in life, is really only just been that you've been missing yourself. And then it's a beautiful awakening to that inner discovery of who am I? Why am I here?
Before we veer too far, I wanted to ask, go back to the DNA testing for a second. Do you mind sharing who you used or what company for the DNA?
Yes, they're called the DNA Company. And I actually was coached by the founder for quite a while in helping me realize, what it all meant, because it's very it's very layered. You have to study this stuff. I mean, you really have to understand what this means for you individually. I found out a lot about my hormones and how I process different hormones. So that helped me then bring that to my hormone doctor to say, don't put me on too much of this because my body processes testosterone very differently than the average person. And so these are things that you can, like I said, really, really come to your doctor with, because they're just going to do, one size fits all. And that's when you start getting into trouble. And this takes time, it takes energy, it takes money, but it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's worth it. This is your life. This is your one precious life to feel the best you can.
Yeah. There's a saying, person with their health has 1,000 wishes. A person with their health, without their, let me just,
One more time.
for the editor. There's a saying that a person with good health has 1,000 wishes. A person with bad health has but one wish.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. And so true.
So true.
And the saying, like, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you can understand yourself, your genetics, your biology, and the things that work for you individually now versus waiting to have to solve a puzzle once all of these health conditions show up, you can save yourself a lot of money and pain.
Particularly a lot of money and pain.
Yeah.
A lot of suffering. People are suffering out there. And, in my dental hygiene career, I sat with over 40,000 patients one-on-one. And you learn a lot about the human body. You learn a lot about energy. I had my hands hovering over their bodies. You can feel the suffering. You can feel the uncertainty. You can feel the pain of people. This is how you can get healthy. Exactly what we're talking about, waking up to your life. I feel like one of the biggest addictions in the human experience is looking away at the truth of your life. I was. How much can we just shove under the carpet and just say, I don't want to deal with that? But when you do, when you start to uncover, when you start to reveal, you start to feel healthier. Like when I sat in that chair and I just couldn't believe how great I felt. It is so worth it. It is so worth going through the pain, going through having to spend money to get this test and that test. It's so worth it.
And when you get a little glimpse of feeling better and that gives you more hope, it does inspire you to keep going.
I wasn't going to give up. There was not 1% of me that was ever going to give up. And I'm still on the journey. You never, I mean, because our bodies are always changing. I think, we grow a whole new body every 7 years. So it's just something it's your responsibility as a human to know your body. And you don't have to be obsessed about it, but like you need to know your body. You need to tune into your body. I would have patients who'd come and they'd have big masses on their neck and not really kind of know it was there. Just looking away at the obvious is very common, very common. And I'm saying, I know it's scary. I know there's a lot of uncertainty. I know you may not know how to approach what you're facing right now, but just start somewhere, and you will be led just out of the intention of you telling, let's say, this grand universe that you want to feel better, that you want to heal. You will be led to the next person and then the next person, and this journey will surprise you and thrill you, and you will become more of who you are. And when you do, you will be able to live in joy and with inner peace. And don't we all want to live with inner peace?
Yes. So you're saying for someone who is listening right now that is like, okay, like, where do I begin? This all sounds great. I want inner peace. Like, what is my first move here?
How do I sign up? Is there a website?
First of all, get a copy of this book.
Well, the message, Get Quiet. It's all about quieting the noise of the world. And because, that first day I got to the labyrinth, my life was so chaotic. But in that split second, in that split moment, I was able to clear the noise and have that intuitive thought come to me. So it's not like you have to get to a certain place and then you'll hear these messages. My life was crashing down, but I made myself get quiet. I made myself tune in. And that's where you start. You will hear the messages of your soul. That's all I can really explain. I know that sounds a little woo-woo, but it's what I feel is true, is that there is something greater than us wanting to guide us. We just have to trust and be open to that guidance.
And listen. Do you think what you just said sort of triggered a thought? Do you think that the presence of symptomology, stuff happening inside the body, like the more stuff happening inside the body, the more that's like the body trying to get loud.
That's the loud.
That's the loud.
That's the loud.
And if we are tuning out and saying like, no, I just got to press harder, I just got to seek something different, I got to grind through this, as opposed to just sit down and STFU. Shut the blank up and just listen, or find a labyrinth. A labyrinth is a tool, right? It's a tool that our bodies will respond to, that our minds will respond to. And maybe to your point of what you were saying about, like, you don't have to like get good at it and then you'll get an answer. It's like, if you're having a lot of symptomology right now, that's the loudness. And it's like, okay, I need to get quiet and listen. What is my body actually telling me?
That is the loud. That is the loud. And I talk
Pain is the loud.
Pain is the loud. Suffering is the loud. It's the space that's full within us of the inflammation, of the medications, we're just full inside. And how do we clean and clear out all of that? We have to get into the quiet to begin to dismantle that bit
Yeah.
by bit.
I'm picturing the body as like a suitcase that you're like cramming stuff in and you're trying to get the zipper, and it's like, this is difficult. The clothing inside is in pain. You've
I feel like this
scrunched it
is
up.
directed at me.
Well, I'm just looking at you.
My packing skills.
Yeah, that's true. But you're good. You've really transitioned to carry on only. It's great.
I've gotten
Yeah.
more quiet with my packing.
No, you're right. You're right, spot on. This is the concept of get quiet, and the 7 paths that I talk about will only do one thing, and that is to lighten your load,
Yeah.
lighten that suitcase. So now you're carrying around just what you need and nothing more.
So get quiet. 7 simple paths to the truth of who you are. Can we go through the 7 paths? I mean, not in
Yeah.
detail, because we don't want to give away the whole book, but
Yeah, I would love to. We've started with the body, the health of the body. The tuning into the body is the first path, because that is what we need first. We need the energy of our body to move ourselves forward. So it's as simple as that. It's the cleaning and clearing of that suitcase of the body. Then it's the cleaning and clearing of our environment. Not just what's in your cabinet, not just what's in your closet, but those storage units that we keep off, campus. We don't even know where the key is. We're paying every month for storage units. Cleaning and clearing out our whole environment. That includes people as well. The third path is the mind. And when you walk the labyrinth, that's the outermost, the longest path. And to me, it's the most difficult, the mind and clearing the mind. Getting to a state of what I call in the book, no mind. That's fun. That's a fun chapter. And the path after that is cleaning and clearing out and processing emotions, stuck emotions. This will really weigh heavy in your suitcase. And these are, emotions are silent. They're sort of stealth in a way that you don't really realize if you haven't processed emotions, how they linger in deep within your cells. This is a very interesting path to clean and clear out. Again, we're just wanting to get to be that lightness of being.
is emotions from like traumas?
Traumas, childhood disappointments,
Yeah.
losses, anger that we hold that we
Yeah.
don't know we're holding, hatred even that we hold that we don't know why we're holding it. This is a really interesting part of life to address. The one part of life that really fascinates me the most, because just when you think you have your emotions, in check, something can trigger you and you respond in a way that's reactive to a situation with anger or frustration or rage, and you don't know why. Well, to me, I want to know why. I want to know why.
Because it means something is left unprocessed inside that, if not processed, basically stuck emotions, lead to dis-ease.
100%. And what I can tell you from those 40,000 patients, this is what I believe causes disease.
Unprocessed emotion.
Yes. And it's interesting, in the book I have energy points, because I'm very passionate about energy medicine. So I feel like shifting the energy in your body is really important in terms of getting to have optimal health. So the energy point in the book around emotions is the ilium, the cup-shaped hip area. And what I see is like dark stuck emotions and energy stuck in those cups, hips. And a lot of times we have back problems or digestive issues, anything around this area, because this area is so stuck within us. And I do these meditations and visualizations where if you just even want to sit right now, and the listeners want to focus in on those hips, and just, I know this is a little weird, but just pulling out that dark, stuck energy that could be in that area and watching it just float away out of you and lightening up that area. And it just feels so good. Sometimes I'll do this at night before I go to bed. And, the mind is so powerful when these visualizations, it can ease suffering.
It's amazing the power of the mind to envision that. And Ashley and I have been really getting into like Dr. Joe Dispenza over the last 6 months. And there's so much envisioning of that little exercise that we just did right there. And Dr. Joe would talk about beginning to feel the emotion of how you will feel once it's gone. Essentially tricking the body, because the body doesn't know, all it knows is the present. So if you start to think about a future state, the body thinks that it's in that state, and it begins to feel
And make chemicals.
and make
equal
chemicals equal to the healing. And it's that innate healing power inside of all of us that begins to trigger on when we get quiet and we focus on, like, okay, an area where you turn your attention is where you put your energy. So if we're putting our energy in those energy centers, we're putting our attention in those energy centers and sort of actively viewing. That's very interesting because, as we well know, there's a lot of people with back problems. Like back pain is a very common thing. In fact, literally last night, Ash and I watched a movie on Gaia called Love Heals. And one of the characters has chronic back pain, got back surgery. That didn't solve the problem, but began to find actual real relief by doing energy medicine work.
And getting quiet.
And releasing traumas. And gosh, I'm 48, and I feel like for the first 47 years of my life, I really did not pay much heed to mindset. And in the last year, as I've begun to learn more and begin to put it into practice and to see results, I'm like, this is amazing. Why didn't I learn
Why
this?
didn't they teach us this?
Why didn't they teach us this 40 years ago?
Yeah.
But it feels like maybe there is a wave that is building here in the USA, where Western medicine is the standard of care, but the somewhat Eastern philosophy of energy and mindset is beginning to cross over and gain popularity, and I'm excited. I mean, I'm excited, quite frankly, like personally, for what it's done, but I'm even like delighted to hear these kinds of stories. That I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one doing some woo-woo weird stuff and getting results. It's like, no, other people are doing the woo-woo stuff. Doesn't cost you anything to get quiet. Doesn't cost you anything to meditate. And you're getting results. This is magical. But it's real.
I think it's the future of medicine. I've been doing this for 2 decades now. I think it has the best results out of anything because it's the most natural to our bodies. And our bodies tell us the truth. They don't lie. They know our bodies know what it wants to soak in and what it wants to repel. And energy medicine is what it wants to soak in. And so as I got to the center of this labyrinth, after cleaning and clearing my whole life, I got so light that I literally felt like I elevated into a new field of growth, which now I understand is connecting to the quantum field where all information is. And that information is shared with us. And what was shared with me were these 7 and 8 energy points that I have an energy medicine healing modality around called the Nemus Code. This was all brought to me in visions and in dreams. And when I started practicing it and healing myself, and then facilitating healing in others, it's hard when you're just a normal, back then I was just a single mom living paycheck to paycheck, to think here I am now speaking this and knowing this is my truth, because so much of it is like, am I going crazy? Is this real? Am I here to do this? And I am. And I own it. And I give myself permission to be this.
Yeah.
In a world that, this isn't mainstream, but I believe that it is now, actually.
Yeah. Nemus Code, does that stand for anything?
No, I saw it clearly in a dream. And I trust these signs that come to me. Just like the 8 energy points came through me while I was walking in my town on a beautiful sunny day, they just started streaming through me, and I couldn't capture them fast enough on my phone to get them all down. And they came in, I had the 7 paths to the labyrinth that we were just talking about, the health of your body, the health of your environment, the health of your mind, the health of your emotions, and so on. But this was the last piece of the puzzle, were the energy points that laid perfectly on top of what I already had. Does that make sense? Like when I went to figure out, once I got the energy points out of me, I went back and I was like, do these correlate with with the work I've just done? And they correlated perfectly. The first path of the body, the first energy point is the abdomen. That is where life begins.
Yeah.
So that was the first path. There was no mistake. The second path is the environment. Cleaning and clearing out our environment opens up our heart space. The second path, energetic path, is the heart region.
Yeah.
The third path was the mind. The fourth path was the hips. And so on. And so when I took this manuscript to Hay House, which was such a beautiful full circle moment for me, because I had Louise Hay's book in my operatory for 20 years, never thinking I'd even be able to have the energy, no less the focus, to be able to write a book.
Right.
No less with Hay House. Here I was, having an opportunity to bring this manuscript and this body of work that I had really come through me after 10 years. And I had the paths, but I didn't have the energy points. So the first proposal I sent to them, they said no. The second one, I learned my lesson because I thought, well, maybe I'm talking too much about God. So I took every word of God out of the second proposal. Of course, that blew up in my face. No, you got to stay true to yourself and your message. And the third proposal, I said, I've got these energy points that just came through me that I think are the key to unlocking this whole thing. And they're like, that's what we want. Include those energy points. And when I did, after a year and a half, they finally said yes to the book.
Could we get 5, 6, and 7? I'm curious.
Sure. Then after we clear and clean the emotions
In the hips.
we have a new way of being at that point. We have a new state entirely. And so then you go to the feet and you ground all of this new focus and state of being, not only down to the earth, how we know that traditional grounding is just, grounding into the earth, but what I envisioned is that we ground not only downward, but up to the heavens as well. And so this is upward, downward grounding.
And that's why we took our shoes off. Okay. I was wondering too.
It's all coming together now.
Okay, number 6.
After we ground all this new information, we really start to dream again. And when I work with clients, this is where the path where they begin to remember their dreams, remember their aspirations. Even as a young child, oh, I always wanted to do that. I always wanted to be an artist. I always wanted to, had these interests. But especially for women, we were always taking care of everybody else's dreams and not our own. This is really when the dreams come flooding back in, and even new dreams for yourself. And then the path right before getting to the center,
Where's the energy point for dreams?
your legs.
Your legs.
Sorry, yeah, your legs, and particularly your kneecaps. And there's a lot of stuck, tense energy under kneecaps. And so again, it'd be that visualization similar to the hips is like, unlock that kneecap, let that stuck energy, out. Not cover it back up with a heavy bone, but maybe just like a light mesh material so that you can still have room and space, so that really the vision is that you're moving your life forward.
So if you've been stifling your dreams, maybe you have knee pain.
You could,
It could be connected to that.
yes,
Fascinating.
yes.
Number 7.
That is when, after you've been dreaming, your intuition just pops online. And for women in particular, we really rely on this, and we sometimes feel like we've lost it or maybe never even had it. And this is where you really, it just you can really trust it now. It really colors in your dreams, and this is a really exciting path. And that energy point is your tailbone. We sit so much during the day. We've had, traumatic experiences around that part, maybe falls as children, whatever, where that area really gets stuck. And again, you can just, even if you tap, like if you're just, if you're sitting for a long time and you end up standing, you just kind of tap that area. So energetically, you're just kind of shifting the energy
Getting
that's been
some
stuck.
vibration there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Getting some movement going there. So that's the area of your tailbone is your intuition. And those are the energy, and then you get to the center of the labyrinth, the
Number
center
8.
of you. I know this seems like a lot of work, but it's not. It's a lot of fun, actually, because you can play with this. You can play with this. And this is your life, over 100-year span, this is nothing really
Right.
to be aware of. But you get to the center of you. You can finally connect to really know who you are at that point. And that energy point then are your shoulders. And what I really like to do, but you crisscross your arms and you set each hand on the opposite shoulder. You're almost like you're giving yourself a big hug. And you imagine bright lights shooting up from the tops of your shoulders up to the universe, to unity consciousness, where all things are there, mainly love. And while you're giving yourself a big hug, gathering all that consciousness, all that expanded wisdom, and bringing that light back down into you, saturating every cell in your body with love, with wisdom, with knowledge.
Wow. That felt really good.
Why did we stop?
I don't know. I was going to keep going. That's beautiful.
Great.
Our bodies love this kind of work. And
You know what? Our bodies love it, but our minds think they don't. Our minds think I've got 117 things on my task list today. I don't
And
have
this is
time
weird.
to sit and be quiet and give myself a hug and connect my shoulders to the universe, okay? But, oh my gosh.
That's exactly what we need.
I mean, it's no secret. It's no surprise that in that just 2 or 3, 5 seconds, however long that was, like the sense of calm that your body feels, you cannot deny it.
And you can't replicate it.
And and that was just doing it for a couple seconds. Imagine if you made more time for yourself in ways like this. How could you feel?
And
How
your
could you-
body responds immediately,
Yeah.
with the chemicals that are supportive to your body.
Yeah, that's when you can't replicate it. I mean, you can't replicate that same feeling with a drug. You can do it yourself through your mind.
So we asked you before when you were in the rock bottom, like on a daily basis, what was your number, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. What would you say, Elaine of 2025, what is your average number on a daily basis?
Well, we talked about the inconsistency back in those days. And, I'm still a work in progress. I think that's really important to share, that I'm not perfect, that I'm always going to want to feel my best and be my best. And now I have the consistency of feeling on most days an 8 or a 9 even. Of course, there are times where I'm maybe a 6, but maybe I'm doing some deep work around emotional healing. And of course, I'm going to give myself permission to feel that 6, and that I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to always be feeling great. That there are going to be times where I just don't, and that's okay. And not to beat myself up and not to feel like I'm going backwards, because I'm not.
Right.
So most days, on average, I'd give myself an 8.9.
That is a good number. That is a great number.
What is next for Elaine Glass, and where can people find you?
What's next is me teaching the work, me sharing the self-healing modalities that people can arm themselves with self-healing, that they don't have to rely on the allopathic world. And that's really exciting to be teaching it. So online courses, workshops, live retreats, anywhere that I can share this message. And I'm so honored and appreciative to be here with you. So thank you so much. They can find me at elaineglass.com. The book is there. They can buy it Amazon, wherever they buy their books. I also read the book. So people have really enjoyed listening to me read the book to them. And it's an exciting time in my life. Sometimes people at my age feel like they're just ending life and like going out into retirement. I really do feel like I'm just getting started, and that's really an exciting feeling.
I feel that. I love this retreat idea, so please send me dates ASAP. I'll be one of the first people to sign up.
Thank you. I'd love to have you.
Well, we'll definitely link that in the show notes to your website and resources that people can find.
Yeah. Thank you for being on the Rock Bottom podcast with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been my honor.